When it comes to xenomorph variants people want to see in the sequel to Alien Isolation, there's one that comes up more often than the rest. And I have to say, I'm a bit confused. Why do we want to see Roman guards? Okay, not funny. Here's what you want to see. Sorry, my bad, I couldn't resist. We are talking about this chunky guy. An impressive sight to behold. But what can it add to the game? Do we even want it? And why is the term Praetorian all over science fiction? Seriously, I could have kept going with my intro joke for quite a long time. What's up with that? Is this invasion of the Praetorians even contained to science fiction?
Why are our train tracks as wide as 2 horses? And what does that have to do with anything? And if you're now shouting at me, rocket booster, space shuttle, I'll have to disappoint you. If all of that made you say, what the fuck is Lars talking about? You'll just have to wait and see.
Trust me.
Welcome my friends, Lars here. Let's dive right in. We are first introduced to the Praetorians in the 1999 video game Aliens vs. Predators. I never played this game, so I can't show you any footage from that, but luckily they also make an appearance in Aliens Fireteam Elite, for which I can provide footage. Praetorians are created when the hive reaches a certain size, 300 individuals according to the fanwiki. Their sole objective is guarding the hive and the queen specifically. The creation of a Praetorian is a strange process, and that's saying something. It involves the royal jelly, the concept of which seems almost forgotten in canon. Here's a quick reminder what royal jelly is in our world, straight from Wikipedia.
Bees, we're talking about bees now.
During the process of creating new queens, the workers construct special queen cells. The larvae in these cells are fed with copious amounts of royal jelly. This type of feeding triggers the development of queen morphology, including the fully developed ovaries needed to lay eggs. I also read that this is not a hard fact, and in recent years scientists don't agree about the role of the royal jelly in the development of the queen, but this is the concept. You might remember it from Futurama.
I'm sick of shaking my booty for these fat jerks.
In all the Alien novels and comics respectively, the royal jelly is crucial for the development of an alien queen, much like what it is or was thought about bee queens. It was also regarded as a precious resource to exploit and develop into performance-enhancing drugs. If you want to hear more about the old novels, let me know. But back to the Praetorians. According to the Alien role-playing game, the queen feeds royal jelly to a few chosen members of her hive. The jelly triggers a transformation during which the Xeno produces a pheromone that makes the rest of the hive attack them. The candidates now have to flee and fend off the other aliens. This ritual ensures that only the strongest, fastest and meanest individuals actually evolve into Praetorians. Makes sense, given their position as guardians of the queen herself. Makes you wonder, could there have been a Praetorian in Hadley's Hope? What do you think? Now I know they just weren't conceived of back then, but theoretically there should have been one. That hive was massive. Now let's take a look at the design of these monsters. They closely resemble the queen herself, just smaller. The prominent head crest ensures that it cannot be confused with a throne or warrior. This kind of makes sense in universe, given the role of the jelly in creating the queen. All in all, a giant, terrifying foe. But do we want it in Alien Isolation 2?
Oh no. God, no.
Obviously, the addition of a Praetorian would only make sense encountering a nest. No issues there. I want to descend into the dark depths of an alien-infested hive again, to the egg chamber and face the queen. If there's a Praetorian on the way, even better. Since I'm not a stickler for canon, I don't insist on there actually being 300 Xenos. Wait, 300? Is that a 300 reference? Oh, no, those were Spartans. Gotta keep my engines straight, even if some of them weren't. In previous videos, I suggested the setting of an overrun Weyland-Yutani lab. This would be an easy way to explain all kinds of xenomorphs. If you ask me, the plot should be a framework for the gameplay and make enough sense not to take you out of the immersion. It doesn't have to be airtight. I like being critical and examining where the writers might have cut some corners, But taking stuff like that too seriously sucks the fun out of everything. It's all a metaphor anyway, or something. It doesn't all have to rhyme.
Oh my god, who the hell cares?
Let's finally address the gameplay. I'm against putting in Xeno-variants just because they are cool. It has to make sense for the player's experience. Let's go through which alien types I advocated for in my video so far. We got the runner aliens for some more action in enclosed parts of the game. And no, I don't want it to be an action game, just watch my earlier video. Drone or warrior, and what's the difference anyway, watch my earlier video. They should be the usual foil to the player, bringing a balance between aggressiveness and tension. Praetorians as a roadblock, maybe? Instead of an invisible wall or something? In that case, the game has to communicate that clearly in order to avoid frustration. And if that can be achieved, it might work. Put a Praetorian in front of the entrance to the nest and only later give us the tools to deal with it, however that might be.
Imagine the Praetorian sitting at a central spot of the map. Sneaking past him is dangerous and only consistently possible through a massive expanse of resources. Now the game creates a situation where you could gain an advantage by trying your luck and cross the map to get to a certain point of interest, or play it safe and search for a different way to solve your problem. This way the Praetorian isn't invisible for 90% of the game while still instilling threat all the way.
Yeah, I like that idea. They should just hire me and be done with it. What else can you do with a monster like that? I don't want them roaming around in early parts of the game or have many of them. I don't have to tell you that that would devalue the Praetorians quite a bit. Keep them as an ace up your sleeve, dear devs. That's all I ask. And also, they should be slower than the average Xenomorph. In my Fireteam Elite footage you can see that they are fast, but that's only because that fits the gameplay. Alien Isolation is a whole other beast, and consistency with other games can be sacrificed in my opinion. Just to reiterate, they need to find a niche for the Praetorian or leave them out.
I can also see another way to fit them into the game. When I named the Xenomorph variants I talked about before, I left out the Queen, which was in my video about that topic. I think my ideas for the Queen are worth considering, but I could totally see how switching the Queen for a Praetorian can make sense. The scope of the first game was rather small. I think it's part of the appeal. A Queen blows that up a bit, why not tone it down? Fighting a Queen might be counterproductive to the generally helpless feeling the first game conveyed. A Praetorian could be a lesser version of the final chapter of the game. Also, the lore implications are once again easy to handle through the handy Weyland-Yutani lab story device. No problems there, or do you think that's too lazy? As I think about it, you can just combine this with my earlier idea. Let the Praetorian be a roadblock or a common thread through most of the game. When it comes to the final chapter, we should make Ellen Ripley proud and use the tools in the environment to finally get rid of the Praetorian once and for all.
How would you implement Praetorians? Or are you sternly against putting them into the game in the first place? And now, remember my intro joke? Yeah, we're gonna have to talk about that. I fell into this rabbit hole and I will take you with me. Let's start from the top. What does Praetorian even mean? Literally, tent of the commander. Wow, that was anticlimactic. Okay, video over. No, of course not. What does it actually mean? Praetorian means a member of the Roman imperial bodyguard, and in times of the Roman Republic, a member of a general's guard. Yes, Rome wasn't always an empire, it was a republic, until a certain Caesar turned it into a dictatorship. Not that that matters for current day or something, just forget I said it. Here's some more examples from modern culture. Star Wars, where the Praetorian Guard doesn't just look dope as fuck, but also guards Snoke's throne room. Sorry for bringing up The Last Jedi, but I think we need to collectively get over it. It's been 7 years. Mad Max, where we have Praetorian Jack, driver of the Immortan Joe's war rig. Immortan Joe is basically an emperor, and please don't kill me, Mad Max fans. I'm not well versed in the lore, but the connection to the ancient title is clearly there. Warhammer. Here the Praetorians are regiments raised from the planet Praetoria. As far as I could find, they are just a renowned military unit. The original meaning is severely diminished. In Star Trek, a Praetor is a political and military administrator in the Romulan Star Empire. And a fucking watch. Remember that meme that was going around that men think about the Roman Empire X amount of times per day or week? Yeah, I'll never get this out of my head. I wish I had some deep insight into why we seem to default to Latin, the language of the Roman Empire, when we want to sound cool, official, nerdy. I mean, nerdy is kind of the new cool, but not really. The world is complicated. I think using Latin conveys some sort of grandeur. It implies history, tradition, without having to actually build your fictional world. Slap on some Roman terminology and call it a day. No, that's too cynical. Why not dig into our shared cultural history? I don't want to sound too Eurocentric, but I certainly feel like the heritage of the Roman Empire is something that still lives on. The letters I used to write this script are derived from Latin. And just until 200 years ago, the region I live in was the Holy Roman Empire of German nations. I want you to think about how little time that actually is. My grandma was born in the early 1900s. Her grandma was born mid-1800s. The Holy Roman Empire ended in 1806. There are only a handful of generations between me and this empire that understood itself as the successor of the actual Roman Empire. Sure, much has happened since then, but culture itself is inert. It changes slowly. And if I haven't lost you by now, dear viewer, I want to go one step further. Think about the connections between language and culture. Language kind of dictates what you think, or to be more precise, what you can think. In 1984, the novel, the word freedom was erased, so that the people don't even have a concept of freedom. It's gross oversimplification, I guess. Don't quote me on that, please. How many words we use today are derived or straight up taken from Latin? So in a way, we still think in the categories that were introduced to humanity thousands of years ago. So if you look at it that way, no wonder the Roman and Latin heritage still holds so much influence. Before I start talking about German civil law and how much of an influence Roman law had on the conception of it, I'd rather just end the video here before you all unsubscribe.
But wait, what about the trains and the horses? I will read to you a popular story and dispel the myth afterwards. It goes as follows. Did you know that the US standard railroad gauge is 4 feet 8.5 inches? Why? Because that's the way they built them in England, and the US railroads were built by English expatriates. Why? Because the first railway lines were built by the same people who built the pre-railroad tramways, and that's the gauge they used. Why? Because the people who built the tramways used the same jigs and tools that they used for building wagons, which used that wheel spacing. Why? Because if they tried to use any other spacing, the wagon wheels would break on some of the old long-distance roads, because that's the spacing of the old wheel ruts. The first long-distance roads in Europe were built by Rome for the benefit of their legions. The Roman roads have been used ever since. The original ruts, which everyone else had to match for fear of destroying their wagons, were first made by the wheels of Roman war chariots. Since the chariots were made for or by Imperial Rome, they were all alike in the matter of wheel spacing, which was derived from the space the horses need. Thus, we have the answer to the original question. The United States standard railroad gauge of 4 feet 8.5 inches derived from the original specifications of an Imperial Roman Army war chariot. There's also an extension to the story about railroad gauges and horses behind. When we see a space shuttle sitting on its launch pad, there are 2 big booster rockets attached to the sides of the main fuel tank. These are solid rocket boosters, or SRBs. These are made by Thiokol at their factory in Utah. The engineers who designed the SRBs might have preferred to make them a bit fatter, but the SRBs had to be shipped by train from the factory to the launch site. The railroad line from the factory had to run through a tunnel in the mountains. The SRBs had to fit through that tunnel, and the tunnel is slightly wider than the railroad track, and the railroad track is about as wide as 2 horses behind. So, the major design feature of what is arguably the world's most advanced transportation system was determined over 2,000 years ago by the width of a horse's ass.
So far the story. The link is in the description, but you can find the story on your own on multiple websites. But is it true? It sounds so hilarious that you wish it was true, but it's not. The first hiccup occurred when I researched the mentioned SRBs. As you can see, the diameter is over 12 feet. Nothing close to 4 feet, 8.5 inches. What is going on here? The further I dug, the more complicated it got. At last, I found something from the Skeptoid podcast, which confirmed my suspicion. The story is mostly false. First off, chariots in ancient Rome were not standardized. So there is no norm from which everything was derived. There were many different track gauges in England too. 5 feet was one of the more popular, for example. As for America, the standardization of track gauges happened because of the Civil War. Logistics needed to be taken care of, you know. The Railroad Act from 1863 dictated the gauge of 4 feet 8.5 inches. The reasoning was that this gauge was easy to build and already in widespread use. The inventor of this gauge was in fact an Englishman, but it is not certain why he chose this. The Skeptoid podcast states as one of the reasons. One theory is that he was simply most familiar with that gauge as he'd worked with it before on tramways. Another harkens back to 5 feet is a good round number, minus 2 inches of width for each track and plus a half inch to allow for a quarter inch of play on each wheel. So, reality isn't always as clear-cut as we want it to be. I really wanted the space shuttle story to be factual, but it is what it is. The truth remains that the Roman Empire together with the Latin language have a long-lasting effect on our current culture, and it never hurts to know where our way of life actually comes from. Thank you for listening, it means a lot to me. So, all I've got left to say is have a great day, subscribe, and see you next time.